On the fifth day of Iran-Israel conflicts, Iran has announced its potential withdrawal from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, raising serious concerns over global nuclear stability. Hello and welcome to Drishti IAS. My name is Saloni Nankyolier, and today we will understand what this treaty is all about and what could be the impact of Iran's withdrawal from NPT. So Iran has announced that its parliament is preparing a bill to withdraw from the NPT or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Now, why is Iran wanting to do so? Because Iran feels triggered by the ongoing escalations with Israel and is concerned over its national security. That is the reason Iran wants to exit the NPT. But Iran's foreign ministry has reaffirmed its opposition to nuclear weapons, citing religious decree. So Iran has also sent out a message to the world that it does not want to exit NPT to create any nuclear bombs or nuclear weapons because this is against the religious decree or fatwa that was issued by Iran's supreme leader Khamenei, because creating or manufacturing any nuclear weapons is against the basic tenets of Islam. That is the reason that as per Iran's foreign ministry, Iran will not be engaging in creating any nuclear weapons. However, it is only going to work on its uranium enrichment facilities for peaceful purposes. Now, what is the NPT that Iran wants to exit? So, NPT or Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty came into picture in 1970 in the aftermath of something known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. So, Cuban Missile Crisis happened in 1962, where USA and USSR were at loggerheads over USSR's potential nuclear presence in Cuba, which was very close to USA's coast. So this was the closest the world got into witnessing a nuclear war between two major superpowers, and any miscalculation could have triggered that. So that is the reason that after 1962, in 1970, a need was felt that we need to have a treaty in place which is going to work towards nuclear non-proliferation, that there should be no more nuclear weapons in the world, and whoever has it should also work towards its disarmament. It prevents the misuse of nuclear weapons, promotes peaceful use of nuclear energy, and facilitates nuclear disarmament. It is monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, or IAEA. Now, this is the same body that passed a resolution on June 12 against Iran condemning its nuclear violations. So, June 12, just a day before Operation Rising Lion of Israel, this resolution was passed by IAEA. And this body is also responsible for monitoring uranium enrichment. So what do we mean by uranium enrichment? Naturally, in uranium, only 0.7% of U-235 isotope is found, which is responsible for creating nuclear weapons. So naturally, you have only 0.7%. Civil purposes, we need 2 to 5%. This is achieved by the method of enrichment, where you are enriching U-235 isotope in uranium. So 2 to 5% is required for civil purposes or in your nuclear reactors, and 90% is what is required in the nuclear weapons. So this agency is responsible for monitoring that no country reaches a 90% uranium enrichment, because then this would be able to create a nuclear weapon. So this is what this agency does. And why are we focusing on nuclear disarmament or nuclear non-proliferation? Because we understand the side effects of using nuclear weapons in a war. Especially during the case of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we saw that the harmful effects of the radiation are felt even by the present generations. So this has a devastating effect on the life and property, on everything, and that is the reason that the world wants to stop nuclear proliferation and wants to disarm all the nuclear weapons that are already there in picture. So NPT divides the entire world into two categories: nuclear weapon states and nuclear non-weapon states. So nuclear weapon states, interestingly, are the same 5 nations who are also the permanent members of United Nations Security Council, which are US, UK, France, Russia, and China. So these are the states who had already created their nuclear weapons before 1970, when NPT came into picture. And then everybody else, like rest of the signatories of the NPT, other than these 5 countries, are non-nuclear weapon states who are not allowed to create or keep any nuclear weapons with them. And these countries are also required to work towards a disarmament of their nuclear weapons, a full disarmament of their nuclear weapons. But this treaty is not sacrosanct. There is an article 10 which allows the countries to move out or to exit the treaty if they feel that an extraordinary events have arisen which affect the national interest. So this is the same article which will be evoked by Iran also if it wishes to exit NPT. Article 9, Article 10 will come into picture. So this is the structure of NPT. There are a total of 191 signatories. Now, interestingly, the countries that have never signed are India, Pakistan, and Israel. These countries have never signed the treaty, and North Korea is a country that had initially signed NPT, but then it withdrew from it in 2003. So, most of the nations support NPT because we understand the harmful effects of using nuclear weapons in a war, and no country really wants that. So, most of the nations they do support NPT, but India has not signed this treaty. Let us see why. So India has refused to sign the NPT because India feels that it institutionalizes nuclear apartheid or nuclear discrimination. So it's just favoring the five countries that already have nuclear weapons, and everybody else in the world is not allowed to make nuclear weapons. So it has divided the world into nuclear haves and nuclear have-nots. And a structural flaw in the treaty is that there is no roadmap for nuclear disarmament. So the world is expected to believe the goodwill of these five countries, that A, that they are not going to use these nuclear weapons, and B, they are going to work towards their disarmament. So this is something that India refuses to believe, and that is why India has always said that it should be universal, non-discriminatory in nature. So the disarmament should be universal and non-discriminatory in nature. It should not divide the world into nuclear haves and nuclear have-nots. And significantly, India has always refused to sign NPT. In fact, we tested our nuclear capability in 1974 and 1998. We follow a credible minimum deterrence policy and no first use doctrine. So India is a responsible nation and we follow a credible minimum deterrence policy. This means that we are going to have nuclear arsenal, but it is only going to be minimum. It is only going to be enough just to deter the other countries from using nuclear weapons against us. To discourage the other countries from using nuclear weapons against us, we're going to have nuclear arsenal in our kitty, but it is not going to be large enough to be provocative in nature. So we follow a policy of credible minimum deterrence and no first use. India is never going to use nuclear weapons in the first instance. However, we have a massive second strike capability that if a country uses nuclear weapons on us, then we are going to retaliate massively. So this is what India's nuclear doctrine look like. What could be some potential implications from Iran's withdrawal from NPT? So Iran would be legally free to pursue nuclear weapons. However, Iran has mentioned that it goes against its religious decree. But because there is not going to be an institutional framework on Iran, it is up to Iran whether or not it creates any nuclear weapons. So Iran will be free to create any nuclear weapons, to pursue its nuclear weapons. And this will also set a precedent for other West Asian nations to pursue nuclear capabilities. Naturally, if you are allowing one country to move out of the NPT and create its nuclear weapons, other countries will also feel motivated to do the same thing, especially the countries that fall in unstable regions or high stake neighborhood regions will be very much motivated for their own national interest to work on their nuclear weapons. It will set a precedent for West Asian nations to pursue nuclear capabilities, and it will also lead to a dilution of powers of IAEA, because IAEA can only monitor its signatory, and as Iran will no longer be a signatory, this agency will not be able to monitor the uranium enrichment experiments that Iran will be doing. And we just saw that 90% of U-235 isotope is required for creating nuclear grade weapons. So this agency will not be able to monitor whether or not Iran has exceeded the limit of and reached 90% or is creating nuclear weapons or not, simply because Iran is no longer a signatory to the treaty. Now that was all for today's video. We understood that NPT's credibility will be at risk if Iran withdraws from it, because then this will set a precedent for all the other countries also, especially the West Asian countries, because they live in a high stake neighborhood, in a conflict driven neighborhood. It will set a precedent for them to move out of NPT and start working on their nuclear weapons. Israel may also retaliate, and the major powers like US, Russia, China are likely to be divided on sanctions or action. So what should be the way forward? The way forward should be that this treaty should be working on its structural flaws. What was the structural flaw? That it does not have a roadmap for its disarmament. So the countries who are already having nuclear weapons in their box, they do not have a roadmap for the disarmament. So how is the world expected to believe that the five countries are not going to use nuclear weapons against anybody? Naturally, they are going to feel provoked and they are going to work on their nuclear weapon assignments. So that is something that's a structural flaw in the treaty. That is something that needs to be taken care of. So now that you understand everything, let us see if you are able to answer this question on NPT. Which of the following statements about the nuclear non-proliferation is or are correct? All five permanent members of the United Nations Security Council are recognized as nuclear weapon states under the NPT. India, Israel, and North Korea have never signed the NPT. A country can legally withdraw from the NPT by invoking Article 11 of the treaty. Which of the statements is or are correct? A. 1 and 2 only. B. 2 and 3 only. C. 1 and 3 only. D. 1 only. So please attempt this question and answer in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching the video. Until we meet the next time, please keep studying and keep revising.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.